So first off, I'd just like to say a huge thanks to our judges. We have Gary Vickers from EMCO, Josh Lawson from Scotiabank, Michael Kalzar from Federated Cooperatives Limited, Kenneth Coates from Johnson Shoyama, Graduate School of Public Policy, Wayne Brownlee from Potash Corp, and Carolyn Tassad from P&G. Competitors will have a maximum of 20 minutes to present. Immediately following the presentation, judges will have a total of 5 minutes to ask presenters questions. The volunteer timekeeper will show time cards at various intervals to indicate the remaining time and will stop any speaker who exceeds the maximum time limit. No questions, comments, cell phones, or picture taking will be permitted from the audience at any time. The audience will only be permitted to applaud following the question and answer period. The audience is banned from any material that bears the name or symbol of a competing university, and we ask that the audience exit the room immediately following the question and answer period. So competitors, you may begin when you're ready.
There is no I in team. Some of the most successful CEOs in the past have been those that really understand their team and their partnerships and really know how to work with their strengths and weaknesses. Well, Mr. McAdams, that is why we're here today. As your fellow coworker at Granite Solutions, my name, Kiana, and my coworker, Josh and Dalen, we are here today to help you with those upcoming requests for proposals that you're looking into, going into these foreign international markets such as Oman, Angola, and Burundi. So here we have identified the main problem today, and that is how should Granite Aviation Solutions move forward with their proposals in these three markets. Of course, there are some underlying issues that we've identified as well. The first being legal and ethical issues. So with these new foreign markets come legal implications, such as bribery. There have been some talks of these fees that you are to pay these countries, specifically government officials, which can be defined as bribery, which we will later on in the presentation define and see whether or not it is legally binding, whether or not it is a good legal decision to move into these specific countries, or if you should just pick one or two of the three different markets that you're looking at. In addition, you're looking into operating in these three countries. Well, how are you going to do that? Are you going to be diving into these regions and setting up an office there, or are you going to be flying out consultants periodically to all three different markets? We are going to address that as well. And thirdly, it is the partner relationships you currently have with Flight Solutions. So how are you going to maintain that partnership? Are you going to go into an exclusive agreement or non-exclusive, which is what we will also address today.
So we've conducted a SWOT analysis to really analyze the internal and external factors that are affecting Granite Solutions right now. And these will affect, your decisions moving forward, going into Angola, Burundi, and Oman. So looking at some of your strengths, your expertise and your commitment to service is definitely your greatest strength. What we've bolded is that superior and fast customer service that Granite Solutions is able to offer. You're able to offer what in 3 hours other companies and your competitors offer in a couple of days. So having that margin, having that customer service is definitely one of your greatest strengths at this point, and we really want to leverage that as we go into these new international markets. Looking at some of the weaknesses, you are a small consulting group currently based out of Canada, and you have no international offices. And not having that international leverage or having that international groundwork being done in these international offices is something to consider moving forward. As my colleague had mentioned, whether we want to continually send consultants into these regions or establish a home base in these regions. Thirdly, looking at the opportunities that are available to Granite Solutions, it is a growing industry, and really why we see that this is a growing industry is due to a variety of recent tragic events, really, that have seen a growing safety concern in the airline industry. And you're able to really capitalize this and provide that safety to a variety of different airlines throughout the world and offer that as one of your competitive advantages moving forward and being able to leverage that as an opportunity. Looking at some threats, there are two main competitors that are fairly large, Honeywell and L3, and there is potential political instability in the three markets that you're looking at, Angola, Burundi, and Oman, of course. Now, Mr. Park from Flight Enterprises came to us with a proposal recently in the last 3 hours about creating an exclusive contract and entering into the contract and really training our staff, our consultants, with some of the things that their staff does as we enter into the market and really being able to manage all of their international operations. And I know this was a question of concern for you, but what we really wanted to answer and address was that we want to accept Park's current proposal. And the reason that we're accepting this proposal is based on 3 main opportunities that come with this proposal. The first is that you're able to really build on those connections with Flight, one of your biggest customers, and build that connection to really gain prosperity in the long term. And we believe that this is the ultimate way that you're really going to be able to achieve excellence with this other company going into the next 5 or even 10 years. The second point is you're able to capitalize on Flight's superior technology, something that other black box industries and black box companies aren't doing right now. And the third point is really that added value of exclusivity in the long term and the generation of profit that we'll see in the next 5 to 10 years after that 3-year ban.
So as Kiana had mentioned, there's 3 markets obviously that we're looking at currently, being Angola, Burundi, and Oman. We're going to dive into each of those in a little bit of detail and analyze really, is it a profitable market to be moving in at this point in time. Firstly, we'd like to go back to what Kiana was talking about in that there are some ethical issues to be addressed at the beginning of this. And firstly, it's just that in Canada, we do have the definition of really what bribery is considered as, and it really is, the key information here is the direct money going to those government officials. So we'd like here to mention something specifically about Burundi, and that in their offer, really what we saw from that was that money was going to go to a government official, and that they were not going to provide documentation otherwise until the deal was completed. So at this point in time, we do believe that this would be an unethical decision to move forward with, and this would be considered bribery. Therefore, we cannot move forward into this market and need no further analysis. We're going to first look at a few key decision criteria in analyzing the other 2 markets before we move in. Firstly, looking at the market potential of the market. How many airlines are there? What does the competition look like? Things like that. Is there political instability or a risk of that? And secondly, the profitability of the market. So hopping firstly into Angola. On the graph, what you can see here is really just a projection from 2013 going right through 2018 of what their GDP growth is going to look like. This isn't the only factor to consider, but this is something to keep on the radar. And as you can see, Angola is growing slowly, and you really are seeing some positive growth in a couple different industries. Although their focus is on oil, which is something to be kept in mind, as the economic information they've provided has indicated that they estimate oil prices to go down, especially from the 2016 through 2018 period. Although in Angola we do see a stable government, a government that is believed to keep power at least until 2018, which is something really good to see. But the key takeaway here is that this is a promising market, but there are 2 key metrics to keep in mind as you move forward, just to keep your eye kind of on these metrics to see if you do need to exit at any point in time. Firstly, those oil prices and the oil production of the nation, and secondly, the political stability factor. Next, we'd like to look at Oman. And we have seen a bit of a dip in Oman's GDP growth, although it is on the up right now. And through 2018, we see even stronger growth than we do in Angola. What we see here is that they have a steady, very involved government. They've created a policy that's not just based on oil like Angola has. What they've created is an economic diversification program focusing on multiple things outside of oil. So this focuses on tourism, port development, and infrastructure. This is something that's really, really great to see as you're really analyzing this market to see if you're going to move in. Currently, their account surplus is very positive. It's over 4% of their GDP, and even with oil prices decreasing through 2016 to 2018, this is only expected to decrease to a maximum of 2%, and they will maintain a surplus in that case. The key takeaway here is that this is the most diversified and promising market that you're looking at. In evaluating the alternatives, as mentioned, both of these markets do present a huge market potential. In Angola, they are looking at buying 10 planes in the first contract that you're pursuing, and in Oman, they're looking at purchasing 20 planes. These are promising markets due to that GDP that we just talked about and that political stability. Those are the 2 main factors contributing to the market potential. And in profitability-wise, we will get into the specifics later, but they are both profitable markets to enter at this time, even with the updated flight package where they're going to train your consultants to be able to pass on that information to the individuals. By providing that subsidy, that will provide an even bigger net for your profits moving forward.
So the recommendation that we have come to you today with is called the AIM game, specifically going into Africa and the Middle East countries of Oman and Angola. So going into the specifics of our recommendation, there's 3 different phases. The first one being train and translate. This is where you're going to be training those consultants, flying them in once this training has been completed, and really getting them, first of all, to know the background information of these flight products, knowing how to install these flight products when they are working abroad. In addition to translating, so translating some of these documents. You're going into foreign markets. They speak Portuguese in Angola, for example, so you do have to make sure that not only do you have these documents in English, but also in Portuguese. Secondly, manage the marketing. So you're going to be doing sales, business-to-business marketing. And this, once again, taking into account the fact that some of these people in Angola may not speak English, so having that translation factor put into this phase is very important. And thirdly, the long-term lookout. So what are you going to do in the long term? Currently, you are deciding on this agreement with Parks, and it has an expiry date of 3 years. So what are you going to do after those 3 years do expire?
So looking first at training and translating, really this is a facilitation of what Flight is offering and through Parks' proposal, and really integrating that in your current company structure so that you can be successful, as we mentioned, in our entrance into Angola and into Oman. So first, the strategy. Immediately accept Mr. Park's agreement and talk to him about those final details that he had mentioned. So he's offering $4,800, for example, for as a subsidy for every unit that is going to be installed in Angola and in Oman, and even in the future throughout all of their international business strategies and operations abroad. And also finalize those proposal details and really ensure that the proposals that you are submitting to Angola and Oman really are contingent upon that factor, that they're able to provide with you the documentation that proves what they're doing is not bribery. And according to the documentation or legislation in Canada, as long as you have that proof, really that what you're doing is entering into contracts that are in good faith, and therefore you are safe as a company, and you're able to operate in these countries based on ethical business practices and not on terms of bribery. And thirdly, purchase that EDC insurance or look into other insurance options to ensure that these companies maybe you aren't as familiar with, but you're able to maintain that accounts receivable and not be delayed into the long term, and you're able to be paid for your work in these countries. Now, what is the purpose of all of this? Really maintaining that strong relationship with Flight, as I mentioned before, securing those contracts and ensuring future revenue streams, not only in Angola and Oman, but really further than that. Currently there is a restriction in place for the next 3 years, but beyond that, we really want you to be the exclusive distributor of Flight into the world, and whether that be their entrance into North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Africa, really the world, it's a world of opportunities moving forward from there, and we really want to ensure these long-term revenue streams. And thirdly, minimize that risk of lost AR, as I mentioned before. Again, in the translate and translate phase, another thing that you really want to do is facilitate the training process to approximately 40% of the consultants with Flight, and ensure that those consultants are culturally trained. Currently, we've invested about $200,000 in the Africa and Middle East region. Really leverage what knowledge you have gained from this and incorporate that into the training of these consultants to make sure that, of course, they are prepared about the cultural differences as they enter into Angola and Oman throughout the next 5 to 10 years. And potentially recruit 1 to new Granite consultants, really to ensure that those lost billable hours, those 20% loss in billable hours, can be made up, and this is obviously going to be contingent on the success of the entrance into Angola and Oman. So why are we doing this again? Again, maintaining that superior customer service in these new markets, that fast-paced, extremely high-quality customer service that you are known for as a company, and being able to offer this in Angola and Oman, but also being able to offer this into the long term. We will see potentially a 20% loss in billable hours, but this should only affect 40% of those consultants, which is why we've chosen that ratio there. And by hiring those 1 to new recruits in the next 1 to 2 years, you're really ensuring minimizing that loss of billable hours in the long term to really ensure that you're able to maintain that customer service and really successful integration in these new markets and minimizing the loss I've mentioned many times already.
So once you're ready and you've done the training and the translating, this is where the marketing part comes in. So specifically in this phase, you are going to begin those B2B sales in Angola and Oman. And just to go over, like I said, that translation, just to build that connection and really make that cultural connection with these different foreign markets, you are going to target the different marketing in their languages. So for example, we've translated it into Portuguese. So in Angola specifically, you would come to them with a little pamphlet showing the value propositions of these flight products. And for example, it would say, guarda os costas para una vida en solo mes y medio con esta tecnología. So that means you would save enough money from a lifetime in just 1 month and a half. So by these people purchasing the flight products, they would actually make up that amount in just 1 month and a half and have that technology for a lifetime. So that flight technology really emphasizing the value proposition that flight is bringing to these different markets. So the purpose of this, just to reiterate, is to effectively communicate your product and the value proposition there, and to make effective intercultural connections with these different foreign markets. And then moving along to the long-term lookout. So this is really the long-term aspect of the implementation of this recommendation. So in this, you're going to look into establishing offices in these regions. Once you have established, for example, in other markets, you've established different sales. So you're selling flight in other Asian countries or other Middle Eastern countries. So we do advise that you look into setting up an office there, as it might be more financially feasible. As it is only $200,000 to establish, and you would save on flight costs from your offices in Vancouver and Montreal, as they are around $2,000 to $3,000 round trip. And then you would look to renew that flight contract. Like I mentioned, it does expire in 3 years, so you would want to look into whether or not you're going to continue it, whether it's going to continue being exclusive or non-exclusive. And the purpose of this is really to establish these connections in foreign markets and really diversify into other foreign markets effectively.
So a brief timeline to take you through kind of how this is going to look in the short and the long term. Today we're going to accept Park's proposal and finalize those RFPs and those proposals to Angola and Oman. As we mentioned before, we are not going with the third country and the third market because really at this time the money that we are going to be processing through will be considered bribery according to Canadian law, and we really just don't want to be operating in unlawful grounds in other countries. Looking in 1 to 2 weeks, purchasing that EDC insurance and scheduling that consultant training and really facilitating flight's entrance and that partnership that you have with Flight to ensure that you have that knowledge base going forward into Angola and Oman. Within 1 to 3 months, really start and ending and completing that training for consultants so that they're ready to go and ready to be operational in these countries, and to then enforce the cultural language training after that $200,000 investment in these countries is complete and you can really draw from the takeaways from this preparatory phase. And in the long term, begin marketing and potentially establish offices after a certain pilot phase in these areas and provide that investment there.
So now we'd like to hop into the specifics of really how profitable both of these nations are going to be together. So what we've come up with for you here is a projection of your profits, firstly in 2015 and secondly in 2019, how much you're going to be making by just these contracts that you're participating in right now, these proposals that you're submitting. So in 2015, you're going to make $135,000 in profit, and in 2019, we believe this is going to grow more than 1,000% to over $14 million. We can get into the specifics further of that in the question period if you'd like, but I'd like to include 2 key points that these do not include 2 important costs. The first cost is the 2.5% that it would cost to get insurance. Because we're unsure at this point if we're going to be able to attain the insurance, we'll add that percentage in later if that number does fluctuate. But seeing the profits here, it really is feasible to purchase that 2.5% insurance. And secondly, if we do see currencies fluctuating in these countries, we would participate in forward contracts to be able to mitigate that risk in the future. And this would be a minimal about 5 to 7% cost as well moving forward, which would well be covered by these profits. Looking at a few other risks of the plan, firstly, it's that the consultants are unhappy with the travel time, them having to fly back and forth all the way from Canada over to Angola and Oman. Really what we'd see here is if that we do get an increase in those complaints from the employees, what we'd like to offer them is some additional benefits and payments to really satisfy them as they are going to be traveling long distances. And to note as well, this would be a short period of time before you establish offices in those areas. The second risk we'd like to talk about is really that there would be a political uprising in either one of those countries. As we mentioned, this is a key metric to watch as you move forward, to check in at least every 6 months with. And really, if you see that political risk factor rising to a dangerous level in either of these countries, we would suggest to immediately remove employees from there and suspend operations to really see how that follow kind of happens and really proceed from there. But you will be diversifying into other markets hopefully by that point in time, so you can really keep the ball rolling on the international expansion. And really just to wrap up, we talked today about the 3 proposals that you have to submit very shortly. Firstly being Angola, secondly being Burundi, and thirdly Oman. And we've talked about how in Burundi this appears to be an unethical and illegal situation to participate in. So we suggest only moving into Angola and Oman, as they both look very profitable and promising. We've talked about the AIM game strategy, which is really not only how to move forward in the short term, but also how to succeed in the long term and to mitigate any risks that may come at you. And really how you're leveraging the technology provided by Flyte to really make those connections in these other countries and these new international markets and to ultimately prosper, not only in the short term, but in the long term as well. Thank you very much for your time and listening to our presentation today. We'd like to open the floor to questions.
I just have a question on your projections. So you're talking about some pretty significant profit, $14 million based on looks like about $67 million of revenue.
Definitely.
In 2019.
Yep.
So I'm just curious to know how you base those projections. Just by a quick read, it looks like you're anticipating 1,500 units being sold in 2019, which is in the tens of billions of dollars in terms of aircraft investment. I'm just wondering where that investment's going to come from in those 2 countries.
Sorry, where the investment is going to come from?
Yeah, who's making that investment in all those airplanes?
For sure. So the actual contracts that have been, the proposal, sorry, that you have been in negotiation with currently, the projected market potential for all 3 markets is 8,500 units. And these are the actual projections provided by the companies in these nations of how many planes that they will purchase. I believe in material was Exhibit 9. So we've just used those numbers going forward. It just projected the slight increases in prices as we go from 50,000 per unit to 52,000 per unit, and just included all of the costs coming out to the total margin being just over 14 million in the last year. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
One cost that you had excluded from the projections was the EDC insurance.
Correct.
Would you proceed without the EDC insurance?
We do believe that even if the EDC insurance was not possible, there would be other methods to get insurance. But if there were really no other methods out there after exhaustively testing the market, it still would be okay to move forward because you would be able to get into a legally binding contract, and these actions are not illegal. So it still would be okay to move forward, especially because you're only buying a few units in the first year. And if really there is a big risk, you could exit the market and really cut your losses early. So it is safe to move forward.
I think I heard you say we'd get legal advice before the contracts went forward. That's correct, on the foreign corrupt practices issues especially?
Yes, so currently you're not able to contact your lawyer in the short period of time you have before the negotiation, so this is our suggestion. But yes, upon offering them the proposal, you could consult further legal clientele.
But I think it would happen.
Oh, definitely. If you got the proposal and they were okay with it, yes, you could consult further.
Why did you love Burundi so quickly?
We really want to maintain your company as a strong ethical company, not just a company that leverages the highest cash flows or gains the highest revenues, but something that is operational in Canada and worldwide. And we see a lot of growth potential for your company to operate in a variety of different countries. So really maintaining that bottom line and being ethical and being lawful will be really important, and we really took that as a core value for our company moving forward.
You consider the 2 alternatives. One is actually checking with the lawyer to see if your assessment is right. And the second one is renegotiating a very small part of a large contract.
Just at this time, the fact that you cannot contact these lawyers as there is that time difference, you're currently stationed in Frankfurt, we decided to go with that decision of recommending that you do not go with Burundi, as there could be some legal implications that could lead to imprisonment. So for the time being, we do believe that you should not consider it as a viable option.
And if I could just add on to that as well, we have actually done an analysis of the market in Burundi. If you do consult further legal counsel in the future and find that this is an okay opportunity to move forward with, we have actually analyzed the Burundi market and just recognized as well that there is a little bit of a risk of political stability, but they are on the up in the GDP sense looking forward.
What do you think is your biggest risk from a competitive standpoint? So there are big players in the markets from an airline standpoint versus low-cost carriers. There are other technology solutions. What are the biggest risks that you should be thinking about
So one of the biggest risks is that you are on a tight deadline. So there have been other competitors looking into Angola and Oman. So one of the things we recommended was that you immediately submit these requests for proposals for these different markets. And we do really emphasize that in order for your other competitors not to step in and swoop these out of the picture completely. Just so that, once again, emphasizing that prosperity that it will bring you once you do establish presence in these countries and you do obtain these as clients.
So given how lucrative this is, you don't anticipate there would be anything else that competition would do to disrupt that?
For sure, we do believe that a lot of companies are going to be participating in research and development to try to attain a product to compete or beat your product out of the market. But as you see profits in these new markets you're entering after the first year and the second year, when you're starting to get those larger amounts of profits, to mitigate that risk, you could also participate in the research and development. But right now, the key thing is that your product is absolutely superior to any on the market, and it will take them a lot of time and investment to be able to develop that.
Or they could buy them.
What, sorry?
Or they could buy them.
That is possible as well.
All right, that's all the time we have, so thank you very much.